Okay, quick recap in case you missed my last video. I'm engaged. My partner proposed to me recently and it was amazing. It was the best evening of literally my entire life. I'm 35. Okay, I've seen a lot. I've done a lot. I've lived in many places around the world. I've experienced incredible things. I have walked along the Great Wall of China and climbed Mount Fuji. This right here, this is the best thing that's ever happened to me. This is the best night of my life. Surrounded by friends and good poetry. This was the best thing that's ever happened to me. I am engaged to the single greatest person I have ever known in my entire life. I am so lucky. I'm so blessed. But I'm also not blessed because I put in the hard work. Okay, I found this person. It wasn't easy. It took a while. What am I saying? Anyway, I'm engaged. I win. Here are some books. Right, this is everything that I'm going to be reading in November. Yes, November. I'm filming this video super duper early because I had things to do. And for the first time, I love making these monthly videos, but for the first time ever, I am including comic books because I am increasingly talking about comics more and more, which is all very exciting, and I know a lot of people are really enjoying it. So these are all of the books and comics that I am hoping to read in November. One of them I mentioned last month and didn't manage to read in October, so I kind of turned it into a part of a theme. You'll see what I mean. Let's go. The first book that I am planning to read in November is this. You might recognize it. This is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. In October, I made 2 videos about Alchemized by Sen-Lin Yu, the single worst novel I have ever read in my entire life. A blight on the history of literature, a cruel and twisted fantasy that I hate with every inch of my soul. And in one of those videos, I mentioned the fact that Wuthering Heights is a better book in every single way than Jane Eyre. And I had a lot of people asking me to do some sort of comparison video to talk about why Wuthering Heights is better than Jane Eyre. Well, problem, I didn't think I had a copy of Jane Eyre, emphasis on think, and I've only read Jane Eyre once, and it was a good while ago, so I need to read it again. I was in a charity shop and I picked this up for like £2. Until I got home and realised my partner has a copy of Jane Eyre. I didn't think to check their shelves. Doesn't matter, this is a nice cover. So anyway, I'm gonna read Jane Eyre again in November. And I'm going to do a video explaining why it's not as good as Wuthering Heights, and why Emily Bronte is a better writer than Charlotte Bronte, and why Charlotte Bronte wasn't a very nice person, as far as we know. I'll get into all of that in the video, and of course, I will mention Anne Bronte because she is the underdog. I've read one of her books. I have it somewhere. Yeah, Tenant of Wildfell Hall, just there. I will bring that up. I have done a video about that in the past, so anyway, Jane Eyre. I'm going to read it again and I'm going to rip it apart because Wuthering Heights is better. And staying on the theme of classics and gothic fiction, I picked up a, well, not new, but new to me, copy of Frankenstein. I never wanted to be the kind of person that owns multiple copies of my favourite book. I always thought one surely would do. Turns out that's not true. I now have several copies of Frankenstein. I have Junji Ito's manga adaptation of Frankenstein. This is really great. It's literally just Frankenstein turned into a comic book. It's totally faithful and it's absolutely stunning. It's Junji Ito. I've also got this copy here, which is a Barnes & Noble edition. This was the only copy I had for so long. I didn't buy it in the States. I bought it in like a Waterstones in Bristol. Anyway, this is like pride of place. I've also got the 1818 edition because there's a whole conversation around whether or not this or the edited version is better. And if you pick up just a random copy of Frankenstein, it will be the 1831 edition, but a lot of people argue that this one is better. So last year, I think it was, for Halloween, I read both like simultaneously to have a look at how they're different. And I did a video about that and how reading both at the same time kind of ripped my brain apart. But anyway, the 1818 text is better. And now I have this, and I thought, well, might as well read it. What is this anyway? This is a very detailed, illustrated edition of Frankenstein. The illustrations were done by Bernie Wrightson, who is no longer with us. This was done, I think, in the 80s, 90s. According to the introduction, he was working on this illustrated version of Frankenstein for like 7 years. And if you don't know who Bernie Wrightson is, he was one of the co-creators of Swamp Thing. And in case you don't know what Swamp Thing is, this is Swamp Thing. Well, this is Alan Moore's Swamp Thing, which was kind of a reboot of Swamp Thing. And to this day, this is kind of the goated version of Swamp Thing. Alan Moore's Swamp Thing is my favourite thing that Alan Moore ever wrote, and I really do absolutely adore it. But Swamp Thing was originally created by Len Wein and Bernie Wrightson. And Bernie Wrightson is a legend of comic books. And this illustrated version of Frankenstein is the other big thing that he did. Now, by the time this video goes out, I will have seen Guillermo del Toro's film adaptation of Frankenstein, and I'm very, very excited. Like I said, I'm making this video really early. But since I am very excited for that film, because del Toro is my favourite director, and he's adapting my favourite novel, I thought, yeah, feels right to get myself a nice new copy of Frankenstein. This thing has 50 illustrations in it. I may do a full video about Frankenstein. I mean, I've made multiple at this point. And so in that video, I will go through some of the illustrations in this absolutely gorgeous book. Now, if you watched my last video or the one before it, you'll know that I recently read the most disturbing horror novel I've ever read in my entire life. This, You Weren't Meant to Be Human by Andrew Joseph White. This is a really incredible horror novel. It's really screwed up. And I've mentioned quite a lot on my channel recently that I haven't been in a horror mood for months and months, and well, I jumped in the deep end here, getting back into horror with the most twisted, messed up thing I've ever read. And now, yeah, I am kind of in a horror mood. So I picked up this. This is the new novel by Philip Fracassi. And more than once when I've talked about horror on this channel, I have mentioned the fact that Boys in the Valley by Philip Fracassi is one of the scariest things I've ever read. And this is definitely one of my favourite horror novels. It's amazing how many of my favourite horror novels came out in the past few years. Things like Tell Me I'm Worthless by Alison Rumford, Camp Damascus by Chuck Tingle, Anything by Andrew Joseph White, Brother by Anya Alborn, The Reformatory by Tananarive Due. These books all came out in the past 5 years, and so did this. We are seeing an amazing renaissance in the horror genre right now, and Boys in the Valley is right up there. So when I was browsing a bookshop and I saw that his new book was out, yeah, I jumped on it. This is the Autumn Springs Retirement Home Massacre, and honestly, just on that name alone, I was kind of hoping that this is an antidote to those cozy mystery stories written by Richard Osman, the Thursday Murder Club, I think it's called. A film came out recently, a bunch of old Tories in a retirement home solving crimes. I don't care. I've never cared. Richard Osman's a twat. But this sounds really fun. Rose Dubois is not your average final girl. Rose is in her late 70s, living out her golden years at the Autumn Springs retirement home. When one of her friends dies alone in her apartment, Rose isn't too concerned. Accidents happen, especially at this age. Then another resident drops dead, and another. With bodies stacking up, Rose can't help but wonder, are these accidents old age? Something far more sinister? Together with her best friend Miller, Rose begins to investigate. The further she digs, the more convinced she becomes. There's a killer on the loose at Autumn Springs, and if she isn't careful, Rose may be their next victim. It sounds simple, it sounds fun, but honestly, Philip Fracassi has an incredible talent for subverting horror expectations, as he proved with Boys in the Valley, and I love slashers and mystery stories so much. The more I think about it, the more I think, no matter whether or not I'm in a horror mood, I can always enjoy a good slasher. Slashers are fun, and I'm hoping that this has that slasher mystery vibe. It seems like it, so I'm gonna jump into this real soon. Now, I mentioned before that in October there was a book that I didn't get to, and I kind of turned that into a theme. Here's the theme. Romantasy. But what I hope is good romantasy. The book from last month that I didn't manage to get to is this. The Second Death of Locke by V.L. Bovalino. I already talked about this in a previous video, so I'm not going to go over it here, but it seems like a fun subversion of gender tropes and gender expectations within the genre of romantic fantasy. We have a female knight who is kind of a bodyguard to a male mage, and the two of them are going to fall in love on some great quest that they're on. At least as far as I remember. like I said, I haven't read it yet, but I am really excited. I'm very hopeful that this is going to be good. And I'm pretty sure I mentioned last month that I literally bought this because of the cover. This is the most beautiful cover I've ever seen. Like, this rivals my favorite book covers ever, which are just behind me here. These Samantha Shannon books, the dragon ones, they're so gorgeous. But this, oh my word. A woman in a suit of armor. I'm not difficult to please. Give me a woman in a suit of armor. Oh look, here's one. I'm gonna read it. Now, the reason that I'm doing this is because I've spent quite a lot of my time on this channel ripping apart romantasy fiction, but what happens as a result of that is I spend a lot of time within romantasy, digging around, finding the good stuff, and realizing there is a lot of good stuff. So I'm kind of in it now. I'm enjoying romantasy. The problem is, there's as much bad as there is good, and often I pick up a book and find out it's one of the bad ones, which is what happened with Alchemized. I didn't do my research and I got burned, but I made some really good videos out of it. I made myself the enemy of the moronic Alchemized fan base, and I'm so happy about that. But here's something that I know is going to be absolutely wonderful, like 100%. I don't even need to read this to recommend it. How am I so sure? Well, this is the new book by Tasha Suri, so of course it's going to be amazing. Tasha Suri is the author of the absolutely phenomenal Jasmine Throne and its 2 sequels, which I haven't read yet. And the Jasmine Throne is one of the best fantasy novels I've ever read. Now, a lot of people do call this a romantasy, but it kind of toes that line because, first and foremost, this is a work of politically dense, epic fantasy to rival something like Game of Thrones. This is a wonderfully complex Indian history and mythology inspired work of epic fantasy. A book about revolution, a book about empire, about the damages of imperialism, but along the way, our protagonists do fall in love. And Tasha Suri is gay, as far as I know. She often writes about gay women. Anyway, this is gay. And so is this. And whether we're talking about epic fantasy or romantic fantasy, Tasha Suri does not get the attention she deserves. Authors love her. If you read or watch an interview with a female fantasy author, she'll bring up Tasha Suri. Samantha Shannon is a massive fan, but Samantha Shannon is bigger, more famous, sells more books, and I don't think it's fair. The amount of authors that bow down at the feet of Tasha Suri is not comparable to the amount of readers that seem to understand how wonderful her books are. And it fucking frustrates me. So I'm gonna go crazy over this. This is The Isle in the Silver Sea, and it is a romantic fantasy book. The Jasmine Throne wasn't marketed that way. Like I said, it's more epic fantasy with a romantic subplot. But this is a romantic fantasy novel. And the Jasmine Throne was set in a very Indian-inspired world. This is set in an alternate mythological England, to the point that, like, I picked this up today, and I was in the Waterstones cafe sort of flicking through it and reading the first chapter, and the map in the front is Britain reversed. Like, it's literally flipped backwards. How great is that? It's not the British Isles, because Ireland is not here at all. This is England, Wales, and Scotland. And the place names are fascinating. Like, where the Cotswolds is, you've got Mad Bess's Wood. And in the heart of Mad Bess's Wood is something called the Heathen Temple. Where Snowdonia is, you've got the Copper Mountains. And within that mountain range, you have the Witch's Tor. Where Lindisfarne is an island. I went there like a year ago with some friends. It's gorgeous. It's where 28 years later was filmed, on Lindisfarne. Lindisfarne here is called the Broken Abbey. And all of this is written in lowercase. Anyway, I could go on. It's fascinating. From the blurb, as I understand it, this is the story of a knight and a witch, who are both women, and they are part of a cycle of doomed prophecies where a knight falls in love with a witch and then kills her and kills himself. It's always a man and a woman, the knight and the witch, right? And it's been happening over and over again for centuries. It's a curse, mythological curse. And here it is, this cycle potentially being broken by the fact that this time it's 2 women. That's what I'm piecing together based on the first chapter and the blurb. I'm probably wrong because I haven't read it yet, but God, it sounds good. Then we have a book that, well, I was looking at the reviews, and the amount of people who have just over and over again described this book as uncomfortable. Over and over again. And I find that very interesting because the people who've left those reviews on Goodreads or other places have said that they like romantasy, but this is romantasy tropes completely flipped on their head, and it's making them uncomfortable. So I think that's a good thing. This is an outright feminist work of romantasy. This is called What Fury Brings by Trisha Levenseller. She's written a few YA books. I've got one of her YA books on my TBR, and this is her debut adult fantasy book. And it seems to be set in a kind of Wonder Woman, Themyscira, Greek mythology kind of place. In a kingdom where there is a matriarchy and women are the powerful gender. And their neighboring nation is a patriarchy. And these two nations are at war, and there's a whole thing going on. So it's a proper Themyscira kind of situation. And the amount of women who've read this and said it made them uncomfortable, the idea of a matriarchy or women actually being powerful and in charge, that kind of raised a lot of red flags. But it made me very excited to read this. This is flipping gender roles and patriarchal oppression on its head and being like, well, what if women did to men what men do to women? Really excited for this one. And then we have a book that I have picked up purely because of the hype around it. The last time that I did this, aside from Alchemized, which was a car crash and the worst thing I've ever read in my entire life, was The Raven Scholar by Antonia Hodgson. When I read The Raven Scholar, I picked it up because of the hype, because people were saying it's the best fantasy novel to come out in years. And I thought, is it really going to be? Am I really buying into the hype? Am I going to be that naive? Oh, it actually is. Like, it's the best fantasy novel I've read this year, easily. So it worked for The Raven Scholar. I did a rave review of that book, and I will talk about it with anyone at any point. It's amazing. So I've done it again with this, but this isn't a fantasy book, it's a romantasy book, and that's an important distinction. But the hype around this is equal to the hype around The Raven Scholar, so I'm hoping it's not going to disappoint. It took me a few goes to pick it up in a bookshop, read a bit of it, read the blurb, and repeatedly go maybe, and eventually I just went, it. Let's give it a go. This is Silvercloak by L.K. Stephen. And what's interesting is, from the way it's described, from the multiple different sort of rewrites of the blurb that I've read in different places, romance isn't mentioned. It really seems to have a bigger focus on the protagonist and their journey and the fantasy world around them. So I am hoping it's not going to be a toxic romantasy. I'm hoping that it is more like The Jasmine Throne or The Raven Scholar, where there is romance built into it, but it has a focus on the journey of a dark fantasy heroine. I hope so. I really, really hope so. And just to finish off, here are some comic books that I picked up recently and I'm really excited to read. I mentioned in my last video, my wrap up for October, that I read something called The Rocket Fellas, which is part of a new imprint within Image Comics called Ghost Machine, which is created by Jeff Johns. It is his attempt at creating a whole new comic book world to rival Marvel and DC. And The Rocket Fellas by Peter J. Tomasi and Francis Manapul, my favorite comic book artist, was so far my favorite comic book of this year. I'm using the word best or favorite a lot in this video, but I'm talking about a lot of stuff that I love, so just go with the hype. And because I've been enjoying Ghost Machine so much, and we're in this sort of autumny, wintry, Halloweeny season, I thought, hey, what's this? Another one. This is Hyde Street by Jeff Johns. It's drawn by Ivan Reis, who is one of the best artists in the game. He's drawn so many of the best DC stuff over the past sort of 10, 20 years. And he's worked a lot with Jeff Johns, because Jeff Johns is a very prolific writer. So he's worked with Francis Manapul, Ivan Reis, Jim Lee, Ethan Van Sciver, although he's like a crazy alt-right maniac these days, so we don't talk about him. But Ivan Reis is a legend artist, so this is going to be gorgeous. And Hyde Street sounds like a kind of Twilight Zone-y, or did you watch Del Toro's Cabinet of Curiosities? Because you should. It's on Netflix. It's a curiosity box mini-series of standalone Twilight Zone-y style horror stories written and directed by different people and gathered together and hosted by Del Toro, and it's really great. This sounds a bit like that. That's all I know, really. So let's see if this is any good. I'm pretty sure it will be. Then we've got the new Batman and Robin comic. This is called Memento, and it's written by Philip Kennedy Johnson, who is one of the big names in comics right now. He's written so many of the best comics over the past few years, both Marvel and DC. He had a great run on The Incredible Hulk for Marvel. He wrote an Alien comic. I think Dark Horse owns Alien. Yeah, he did an Alien comic that I've been meaning to read. And his run on Superman was so great. Proper, like, pulpy sci-fi stuff. Really, really fun. I'm very curious about what his approach to Batman and Robin will be. The Batman and Robin dynamic for the past 10, 15 years has been quite interesting because Robin has been Damian Wayne, Batman's son. That's always given way to pretty interesting and unique Robin stories. Let's see what Philip Kennedy Johnson does with that. And to finish off, a comic that I found in Blackwell's that I didn't even know existed. This is Batman the Detective, a pretty new comic, and it's written by my guy, my favorite comic book writer working today, Tom Taylor. And this is drawn by Andy Kubert. If you don't know who that is, my God. Andy Kubert is one of the big legends of comic book art. Like, Andy Kubert is a big deal. This is a Batman detective story, and I do love when Batman is focusing his attention on being a detective. But it's set in London. He's gone over to London to do some detectiving. I had no idea this existed. It's kind of like an offshoot, standalone story written by Tom Taylor, my guy. I'm really, really hopeful that this is going to be a really fun thing. I mean, Tom Taylor and Andy Kubert writing a Batman detective story set in London. Yes. Yeah, this is going to be great. That's it. That's my November. That's what my November looks like right now. I think it's going to be a good one. Let me know what you're going to read in November if you've got reading plans, and also what you read in October. And wish me a happy engagement, obviously. I'm engaged and my cat is screaming, so I'm going to go. Support me on Patreon if you enjoyed this video. Buy a copy of my book because it's great. Managing and Other Lies. Link is in the description, just under the like button. You can click that on your way down and buy a copy of my book and join my Patreon if you like what I do. Thank you so much, and subscribe for books.